In April, the political economist Moeletsi Mbeki told CNBC Africa that South Africa is a bomb waiting to explode. All it needs was a little match to spark it, and it would go up in flames. That was an ominous warning. Are we seeing that happen right now? This is the MoneyMakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Let's find out from Moeletsi Mbeki himself whether or not that match has been lit. Is government's agenda starting to be set by the social set? Moeletsi Mbeki, nice to see you. Is this the beginning of the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning? Where are we?
Well, I think it's a warning. This is an early warning sign to the government that the people of South Africa matter. The people of South Africa have a sense of what's right and what's wrong. And anyway, they fought against the apartheid regime, which was wrong. Everybody recognized that was wrong. And eventually they overcame that. So now how the ANC, which was part of that struggle, thinks it can ignore what the population thinks is right is beyond me.
We saw extraordinary scenes last week. Medium-term budget policy statements, students who'd been increasingly angry over a period of weeks broke into Parliament. They were chased back by very, very forceful police officers. MPs sat nervously in Parliament wondering what would happen if the guys broke into Parliament. That all then died down to a simmer. The march then on the Union buildings last week, the President conceded that fees would not go up, and then it all went pear-shaped once again. It's a very uneasy situation that we find ourselves in.
Yes, but you know, in a democracy, those in power, I think, it takes a long time for them to learn that the people who voted them in call the shots. Yeah. They believe themselves to be to be geniuses because they're elected. Actually, it's the electorate who are the genius. So they have to understand they are accountable to the electorate. Students are part of the electorate. University students make up 10% of the people who vote for the ANC. So they put the ANC in power. But the ANC government ignores them and puts up the fees without consulting with them. Then you get what we saw happening.
What's really interesting is that many of the students who took to the streets in the last couple of weeks have been students born post-1994. It's a disappointed generation. It's a generation whose parents sacrificed life and limb literally for the freedom that they enjoy, yet they feel economically encumbered.
Yes, but you see, one of the problems we have in South Africa, which is why I keep pointing out we are at the first rungs of the ladder to high democracy, if that's what we want. We're at the beginning of the climb. South Africa, we don't even have a constituency system. If, for example, we had a constituency system, the government would have been warned a long time ago by their members of parliament, because those members of parliament who came from university-intensive constituencies would have told them what the mood of the students was. But the ANC has been refusing to introduce constituencies, so there's no early warning system for the government.
But our system of constitutional democracy was hammered out at the Cadescent discussions, and it was there decided the proportional representation. It was if I remember, a policy put forward by the Nats looking to protect white minority interests in a future South Africa. Then Frederick van Zyl-Slabbert, the late great Frederick van Zyl-Slabbert, came out with his study into a more equitable electoral system. It made a lot of sense, 10 years ago, and I think it's in a pile just under the National Development Plan.
Yes, it is in a pile. But it was again the ANC that killed the Van Zyl-Slabbert report.
Why is the ANC so scared of electoral reform?
It's because they are afraid of the people. Because in a constituency system, the local party chooses the member of parliament. So the rulers, the leadership of the party leadership has far less control over the member of parliament. Whereas in the PR system that we have now, the party leadership dictates who goes to parliament. And they can kick you out of parliament.
It's all about patronage all the way through.
Absolutely, absolutely. But they are not looking at the downside. which is that a constituency system gives you early warning about problems that are coming up, so that you are warned before they blow up in your face. So this is the balance that the ANC has to strike.
2 or 3 years ago, you wrote a column, Business Day column, if memory serves. You put a date of 2019, and you said 2019 is about the time where South Africa can no longer afford the massive dependency of its population through social grants. That is a tipping point. That's a potential date at which point South Africa simply, there wouldn't have been enough growth. Populations would have got older. The success of HIV medication means that life expectancies have grown, as the finance minister pointed out in the medium-term budget policy statement. All positive things, but we get to a point without economic growth, without the economy growing to sustain its population, and that's where we hit a wall. A couple of months ago, you warned the students are getting angry. There seem to be quite a lot of touch points at play right now.
Yes, you see, the South African government is repeating the mistakes that were made in the rest of Africa in the 1960s, in the 1970s, and so on, which led to this lost generation in Africa. You cannot grow an economy through welfare grants. You grow an economy through production. So you have to make your population productive. That's why if you look at Western countries, if you look at China, the minute unemployment approaches 5%, they make big changes. Why? It's because once you have 5% of the population unemployed, somebody has to subsidize them.
Yeah.
And then those people are not working, so they are not productive. We have nearly 40% unemployment, and we're saying, no, add some more by giving them social grants. In fact, the present government wants to increase social grants to the age of 21. Now, what kind of a thing? They should be looking at how to create jobs for people over the age of 15. But they are looking at how to subsidize them not working.
And also, we've got a tax base that is getting more and more constrained. In the budget this year, the finance minister put up the marginal rate of income tax from 40 to 41%. The Davis Commission is suggesting putting up VAT. Are we reaching a tipping point, a crumbling point even?
Well, I think we are very close to a tipping point in terms of the ability of the government to tax the population. A good illustration of this, again, they should have been warned, is the etolls. Etolls is a tax. They should have been warned that the people were not going to pay that tax, and they are not paying it.
Yeah.
So they went out and borrowed money, assuming that they could just
bulldoze it through, yeah.
Bulldoze the whole thing through, and it hasn't worked.
What we've seen has been interesting is the etolls fight happened in isolation. The student fight has happened in isolation. Moeletsi Mbeki tried to get an anti-corruption march to Pretoria and got a couple of thousand people together in a bit of a damp squib. But at what point, what causes people to stand together and to make a far more powerful statement to government?
Well, the Afrikaners have a word, I don't know if it gets used on CNBC.
Let's hear it.
It's called hatful.
Russell Loach has used it here before, I'm sure, yes.
So,
quite cross.
But
yes.
Everybody gets cross.
Yeah.
You see, what is happening in South Africa is that everybody is getting angry. So they are operating in their different spheres to express their anger. The very rich in this country are very angry. If you read the company statement by Johan Rupert, he is the wealthiest, certainly he must be the second wealthiest man in Africa after Dangote, the Nigerian. He is angry. The students are angry. The unions are angry. So more and more people are getting angry in this country.
The municipal elections next year, therefore, are a very interesting barometer for the real sentiment of the majority of South Africans. That's going to be a clear litmus test.
Oh, it's a very, very important litmus test, because we already have warning signs from the elections last year that the population in the metropolitan areas is now very dissatisfied with the performance of the government. So what we are expecting to happen as political analysts is that a number of metropolitan areas are going to vote. The ANC is not going to get the majority in those areas.
The Cape Town is pretty much done and dusted for the official opposition. They seem to have that one tied up. Patricia de Lille will continue there. Port Elizabeth, Nelson Mandela Metro, is interesting, and Gauteng is interesting.
Yes, absolutely. You see, Port Elizabeth, which is Nelson Mandela Bay, there was a huge shock a few weeks ago when one of the small parties,
the UDM, trumps the ANC,
which had gotten 1.5 votes in the previous local government election, it got 49% of the vote, and it beat the ANC in that election. So again, I keep talking about early warning signs that the government ignores. This is one of the early warning signs that the ANC is going to lose Nelson Mandela Bay. The students make up 10% of the ANC vote in the last election, the last general election. Now, if the students turn against the ANC, metropolitan areas like Johannesburg, which have a huge concentration of students, the ANC could, which is now sitting at about 52%, could easily lose Johannesburg if the students vote against it.
And it'd be really interesting to see where those votes go. Either there's an abstention, which is effectively a vote against the ANC, or there's a vote for the EFF, or there's a vote for a slightly new look DA, which is interesting.
Yes, the DA is growing, the EFF is growing. So and now we see in Port Elizabeth, the United Democratic Movement, a little party. So the little parties, some of them are growing, like we saw in Port Elizabeth. The EFF came from nowhere and is the third largest party in parliament today. So the level of dissatisfaction in South Africa against the performance of the government, especially on economic issues, is growing. It's very clear that the population is unhappy with how the economy is being managed.
Yeah, and that's what democracy is all about, isn't it? It's about sort of putting a government into a job. If the government fails to do that job, the government is removed.
Oh, absolutely.
Does it happen in 2019? It doesn't feel like it. Could it happen in 2024? What are the pictures?
Well, I'm not as courageous as you as to say it's not going to happen in 2019. I think the ANC could lose one or two provinces. And if it lost Gauteng, which is very borderline right now, the game is over. If the ANC loses Gauteng in the next general election in 2019, let's say, and if it loses Pretoria and Johannesburg metropolitan areas in the local government next year, the game is over.
We need to redraw those borders in a hurry then, don't we? The political economist Moeletsi Mbeki, fascinating views as always from one of the deep thinkers about South African politics. More Moneymakers tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that doesn't keep you awake all night. Good night. Bye-bye.